Welcome back to Exploring the Bible. I am so glad you're here today. Whether you're joining us for the very first time or you've been exploring with me since the beginning, thank you. If you are brand new here, let me tell you about this podcast. We walk through the narratives of the story of the Bible, from Genesis all the way to Revelations. And we pull out the lessons, the warnings, and most importantly, we look for God's love and mercy woven in every single story. Because it is there, even in the hard ones, even in the ones that make us a little uncomfortable. God's love is always there. For those of you who have been following along, you know that we've been spending a lot of time in the early chapters of Genesis. We have talked about Adam and Eve and what happened in the garden. We have talked about temptation, disobedience, shame, and consequences. Today, we are talking about Cain. And there is a saying that most of us have heard: history repeats itself. And I want you to hold on to that phrase today. So get comfortable, grab your coffee or your tea, and let's dive in together. Today's passage is going to be Genesis 4:11 through 16. Before we get into the text, I want to give a little bit of context because I think it helps us understand why this story matters so much. Adam and Eve had sinned. They gave in to temptation in the garden, and as a result, they were cursed and sent out of the garden forever. Think about that. A place of perfect peace, perfect relationship with God, everything you could ever need, gone, because of a choice they made. Now, after they left the garden, Adam and Eve had children. Two of them are front and center in this story: Cain and Abel. And here is what I want us to think about. I have to believe Adam and Eve told their boys about the garden, about what it was like to walk with God in that place, about the beauty of it, about the peace of it. And I also have to believe they told them why they were no longer there. They must have told Cain and Abel what happened when they gave in to temptation, what God had said, and what the consequences were. I don't think there was any secrets. These were the life lessons that any parent would teach. So here's where it gets really interesting. Cain knew. He was not walking into a choice blind. He had seen what disobedience cost his parents, and he had heard the story. And yet, here we are. Cain is a different person from Adam and Eve, of course. His reasons are different too. Adam and Eve wanted wisdom. They wanted to be like God. But what they got was shame. Cain wanted to be treated better than his brother Abel. He wanted to feel like he was enough, like his offering was enough. But what did he get? He got his brother's blood on his hands. And in both situations, God gave them chances to do the right thing. God warned Cain before anything had happened. He gave him a way out. But Cain, just like his parents before him, made his choice. And now we pick up right after the consequences begin. Genesis 4:11 says, "Now you are cursed and banished from the ground, which has swallowed your brother's blood." Let that sink in for just a second. God is speaking directly to Cain here. And right away, we notice the parallel. What happened to Adam and Eve? They were cursed and they were banished. And now, so is Cain. But notice something specific here. God says Cain is banished from the ground. Why the ground? Because that was Cain's whole identity. He was a farmer. The ground was his livelihood, his skill, his purpose. And the ground itself had absorbed the blood of Abel. Every time Cain looked at the soil, he would have been reminded of what he did. And God's curse was not just a punishment, it was a mirror. It was a constant reminder of the choice that Cain had made. In Genesis 4:12, we see, "No longer will the ground yield good crops for you, no matter how hard you work. From now on, you will be homeless and wander the earth." Here is where things get really personal. Remember back when God first warned Cain? He said, "If you do what is right, you will be accepted." And that was the promise on the table. But Cain did not do what was right. And now God is delivering the second part of that equation. Not only was Cain losing his family, but he was losing the very skill he had learned from his father: farming, working the ground. Now it will be useless to him. No matter how hard he works, the ground will not produce. I want you to think about that for a moment. Cain's identity, his purpose, his sense of worth was all tied up in being a farmer. And God is saying that is gone now. And then on top of that, he's going to have no permanent home. He will wander, he will never settle. Every place he goes will just be another reminder that he is not where he is supposed to be. Before we rush past this, I want to say something clearly. God is not being cruel here. He is not throwing a tantrum. God is just. He is as just as he is loving. Remember, Adam was cursed to struggle to get food from the ground. It would be hard work. But Cain's sin went further. Cain took a life. The consequences goes further too. God couldn't leave someone with a murderous heart living among the rest of his family. But then Cain talks. And Cain says in Genesis 4:13 through 14, Cain replied to the Lord, "My punishment is too great for me to bear. You have banished me from the land, from your presence, and you made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me." Okay, I want to take a moment here because I think that this one is the most relatable and honestly, the most convicting part of this whole passage. Have you ever noticed that there are two things humans almost instinctively when we get caught doing something wrong? The first thing we do is blame someone else. We saw this with Adam. He blamed Eve. He even blamed God. We saw this with Eve. She blamed the serpent. We could also deflect. We saw this with Cain back in verse 9 when he said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" But then there is a second thing. Once the punishment has been handed down, once it is real and unavoidable, we shift from "it's not my fault" to "this is too much for me to bear." Cain does not say a single word about Abel here. Not one word about his brother, about the grief of his parents, about the life that was taken. The only thing Cain is focused on is what is happening to him. My punishment. You banished me. Anyone who finds me will kill me. It's all about Cain. And if we're really honest with ourselves, we could answer the question, can we relate to that? I know I can. When I have messed up and the consequences hit, my first instinct is not always to have empathy for the person I hurt. Sometimes my first instinct is to think about how this affects me. Now, there's one question worth pausing here. Who exactly is Cain afraid of? The Bible, up until this point, only really names four people: Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. But scholars and theologians genuinely agree that by the time Cain kills Abel, both men are adults, which means Adam and Eve likely had many more children by then. Cain's siblings may well be the very people he's worried about. And honestly, it makes it even more heartbreaking. He is not just afraid of strangers, he may be afraid of his own family. But how does God show mercy to Cain? In Genesis 4:15, we see the Lord replied, "No, for I will give a sevenfold punishment to anyone who kills you." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who might kill him. Now, here in this moment, there is one thing that I really want us to sit with. God had a whole conversation with Cain. Cain killed his brother. Cain lied about it. Cain complained about his punishment. And now, for the first time in this whole story, is finally where Cain is being honest with God. He is scared. He doesn't want to die. And for maybe the first time, he is not pretending. He is not deflecting. He is just telling God how he feels. And what does God do? God protects him. Think about that. This is the same God who just handed down a hefty curse. And now the same God says nobody touches you. If anyone harms you, they will face consequences 7 times worse. And then God gives Cain a mark, not a mark of shame, but a mark of protection, a visible sign that says this person is under God's watch. Do you remember what God did for Adam and Eve after he cursed them? He clothed them. They had sewn fig leaves together that were flimsy and temporary. God gave them animal skins that was durable and lasting. Even in the middle of punishments, God was caring for them. This is the same God we see here. That is who God is. He is just, yes. He does not ignore sin, but he is also tender. He is also present. He does not walk away from the people he had made, even when they walk away from him. Genesis 4:16 is the last part of these verses that we're going to look at today. And it says, "So Cain left the Lord's presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden." Just like that, Cain is gone. He leaves the Lord's presence. He goes to a place called Nod, which I find kind of interesting that Nod means wanderer. God told Cain he would be a wanderer. And the very land he settles in carries the word in its name. Everywhere Cain goes, he carries with him a reminder of what brought him there. So, now we get to what I think is the most important part of every episode. What do we take away from this? What does God want us to learn from the story of Cain? I see 2 really big lessons here, and I want to walk through them together carefully. The first lesson is God is both loving and just. Is it one of the biggest misunderstandings I think people have about God is that they put him in one of 2 boxes. Either God is loving, warm, gentle, present, who forgives everything and never holds anything against you, or God is strict, demanding, judging, who is always waiting for you to mess up so he can bring down punishment. But what we see in this passage, and really throughout the book of Genesis, is we see a God who is both at the same time, fully. God warned Cain. That is love. God gave Cain a chance to come clean after Abel died. That is love. God gave Cain the opportunity to turn things around before anything had happened. That is love also. But when Cain chose not to listen, when he chose not to do what was right, God followed through on the consequences that he had warned about. That is justice, not cruelty. Because a God who only forgives without consequences is not actually fair. And a God who only punishes without mercy is not actually good. Our God is both. I can't say for certain whether things would have looked different for Cain if he would have come clean right away. If he would have said, God, I did it. I was angry and I made a terrible choice. And I'm sorry. I cannot tell you exactly how that conversation would have gone. But what I can tell you is that God always invites us into an honest conversation. He is always asking the question, even when he already knows the answer, because he wants us to own it. He wants us to come to him. Doing what is right doesn't mean being perfect. It means trying to listen and follow what God is telling you to do. We have seen throughout the early chapters of Genesis that sin leads to destruction. It leads to broken relationships, broken purpose, broken homes, but following God, even imperfectly, leads to life. Lesson 2, God's mercy does not always change the outcome. Adam and Eve disobeyed God in one of the most significant ways. They were given only one rule, and they were banished from the garden. That did not change. Cain killed his brother Abel, and then he lied about it. He complained when he was punished, and he was still banished from the land. That did not change either. But in both cases, God did not turn his back on them. He clothed Adam and Eve. He protected Cain. He stayed present. He stayed involved. He kept caring. Mercy does not always mean the consequences go away. Sometimes it means even in the middle of those consequences, you are not alone. Even in the wandering, there is still a mark of protection on your life. Even in the exile, there is a God who still knows your name. And we see this same pattern carried all the way through Scripture. In the New Testament, there is a criminal hanging on a cross next to Jesus. And he says, "We deserve to be here." He is honest. He is not making excuses. He is not complaining that his punishment is too great. He just admits the truth. And Jesus says to him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." The outcome of the man's earthly situation did not change. He was still on the cross. He still died that day. But the mercy came, the grace came, and everything that came in his life looked completely different after that. Because that moment, he entered paradise with Jesus because he was honest. This is our God. Our God is the God who loves us and cares for us. That is who we are exploring every single time we go through one of these narratives. A God that does not stop loving us when we make the worst choices of our lives. A God who marks us not with shame, but with protection. Not with rejection, but with presence. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Exploring the Bible. I hope today you saw that God wants to show us mercy, even when we mess up, especially when we mess up. He is still there. He is still speaking, and he is still giving us a chance to be honest, to come to him, to do what is right. You might be in a season right now where it feels like you're wandering. Maybe you feel like you're in your own land of Nod, far from where you were supposed to be. Not sure how you got there. Not sure how you can even get back. I just want you to know that God knows exactly where you are, and his mark of protection is still on your life. Come to him honestly. You do not have to be all put together. You do not have to be perfect. You don't have to have the right words. Just be honest. Like the criminal on the cross, just say what is true and watch what God does with that. If this episode spoke to you, I would love it if you followed this podcast and also write a review so we can keep this conversation going afterwards. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. The more it's shared, the more people who will hear it. And I want to thank you again for listening to this episode and all of the other episodes that are up on Exploring the Bible. And until next time, God bless.